In today's episode of the Conscienticon, we are going to go over my top 5 favorite laws from a very controversial book, The 48 Laws of Power. The first time I was given a copy of the book, I was appalled by its contents, and I even was disgusted by the person who gave it to me because I thought that that person had lacked morality. But now that I'm more mature, I understand that the book itself was designed to be moralless. The 48 Laws of Power is a book written through the study of courtesan work within political courts. And these were tactics and manipulation techniques that were used by politicians and are used by politicians today in order to gain positions of power and hold that power. Many people out there think that the book is an anecdotal work and not really effective. But I argue that if it wasn't effective, it wouldn't have been banned in several United States prisons because it was particularly effective in allowing people who read it to garner power. Not only is this a popular book among politicians and prisoners, but many pop culture icons have referred to this book in order to help themselves out. These people include Jay-Z, Busta Rhymes, Michael Jackson, and even Will Smith. The sequel of the book, The 50th Law, was endorsed by 50 Cent himself. This is Nick Newman with the Conscienticon, where we share practical, spiritual, occult wisdom. Please take all lessons from the Conscienticon at your own risk. I nor anyone within the network are responsible for your behavior, be they beneficial or damaging. My 5th favorite law from the 48 Laws of Power is Law 23. Concentrate your forces. Conserve your energies by focusing them all into a single source of power. When looking for such a source, identify a single spring that will sustain you for a long time to come. You gain more power by finding a singular rich source than by flitting between many more shallow sources of power. Concentration increases your operation speed, and your operation speed is power. It's important to understand that if you are an individual that's got a lot of different projects going on at the same time, you're not really focused. What you are doing is testing things out. But it's critical to understand that once you test something out and it becomes fruitful, you should anchor down and pour your resources into it. The human brain has a limited attention capacity. The CIA teaches people to count just how many processes they can mentally handle at once and then reduce those processes by 2. So if you're unlucky like me and can only handle 2 processes, then you are still doomed to only handle 1 cognitive process at a time. Too many people fluctuate their attention between too many things. And as the saying goes, where attention goes, energy flows. And if your attention is going everywhere, then it's basically going nowhere. My 4th favorite law from the 48 Laws of Power is Law 40. Despise the free lunch. What is offered for free is dangerous. It usually involves either a trick or a hidden obligation. What has worth is worth paying for. By paying your own way, you stay clear of gratitude, guilt, and deceit. It is also often wise to pay the full price. There are no cutting corners with excellence. Be lavish with your money and keep it circulating, for generosity is a sign and a magnet for power. In psychology, there is a cognitive bias known as the reciprocity bias. When somebody gives you something, you are way more inclined to give something back. In fact, a group of monks did this long ago. The Hare Krishna religious group once took its disciples to airports where they would set with booths full of flowers. Now people would pass by and they would give them a flower. And this led to a huge turnover where people were either joining Hare Krishna or they were giving money, which was really needed. Even though these people didn't want these flowers were forced upon them. So when they got to the nearest trash can, they would throw the flower away. And then the disciples would wait and then go and pull the flowers out of the trash again and start giving them to more people. Someone said, they offered you a flower and tried to get you to take it. Then they asked to tell you their story, and when you said you needed to go, they asked for a donation. Giving you the flower created a sense of obligation, and many people gave them $1 or some change to escape the situation. My third favorite law from the 48 Laws of Power is Law 36. Never appear too perfect. Appearing better than others is always dangerous, but most dangerous of all is to appear to have no faults or weaknesses. Envy creates silent enemies. The people that we love the most are openly flawed in some way. In fact, I believe flaws build character, because a perfect character is basically no character at all. When people display their flaws openly, it disarms people around them. The first law of the 48 Laws of Power is never outshine the master, which has a lot to do with perceived perfection. The book references Nicolas Foucault, who was a superintendent of finances for Louis XIV in 1653. In order to charm the king, Nicolas threw an amazing, lavish party at a chateau. Legend has it that this party was so fantastic that it made King Louis really jealous and spiteful, and so he threw him in prison, and he died in prison. It is my understanding that Foucault only wanted to impress the king in order to get deeper into his good graces. Unfortunately for Nicholas, the people around King Louis had convinced him that Nicholas had been stealing money and was using this stolen money to finance the chateau. King Louis needed any excuse he could get in order to put Nicholas down, and Foucault had died in prison instead of being exiled like the judges had wished him to be. Post a few minor flaws. You will thus diffuse the jealousy of your entourage. Appearing better than others is always dangerous, but most dangerous of all is to appear to have no faults or weaknesses. Envy creates silent enemies. It is smart to occasionally display defects and admit to harmless vices in order to deflect envy and appear more human and approachable. Only gods and the dead can seem perfect without impunity. My second favorite law is Law 36. Disdain things you cannot have. Ignoring them is the best revenge. This is really difficult advice for a lot of people to take, because we don't want to believe that there are things out there that are completely out of our reach, things that will never be attained by us. But it is true, there are some things that are completely out of the range of our receiving. If there is something you want but you realize you cannot have, the worst thing you can do is draw attention to your disappointment by complaining about it. Sometimes it's better to ignore things. You'll make small problems worse, make yourself look bad, and give your enemy attention he doesn't deserve if you respond to a minor provocation. There are really two lessons within this law, and the first one is to identify things that you cannot have. And the second one is to know when to ignore things. Sometimes there are situations where we just can't have things. We cannot have the love of another person. We can't have the respect of another person. We hemorrhage so much power and resource by wasting our attention on things that will never be fruitful. And it is critical for you and I to understand the things that we inevitably will never receive. Now, I believe the universe is quite generous in that when you do desire something deeply and you find the principle of what it is that you desire, you will find this principle in so many other things around you, which is why I adore this law. It is important to understand when you are going to hit a dead end. There have been situations in my life where I have wanted promotions but have known that I cannot get them. There's always something in the way. Sometimes it is the simplest thing that keeps you from attaining a goal, and this could be as simple as someone not liking you, and it can be very difficult to change the mind of somebody. And so when I've been in positions like this in the past, I have relinquished control of the scenario and swapped my focus elsewhere, and it has always been better. You should never allow your happiness to be controlled by the opinion of another human being. As I've said in my other videos before, we all have permittance to exist or we wouldn't be here at all. Before we get into my number one favorite law, I would like to stop and thank the patrons for supporting the Conscienticon. I thank you all so very deeply and hope you are doing well. If you would like to become a patron, there is a link in the description below, and there we share private videos where I discuss things that I cannot discuss on YouTube. We will see you there, my friends. My number one favorite law from the 48 Laws of Power power is law number 13. When asking for help, appeal to the self-interest of others, never to their mercy or gratitude. This is one of my favorite pieces of wisdom I've ever received. This also feeds into what we were talking about earlier in the video about the reciprocity bias, about how people are more inclined to give you things when you give them things. However, when you are asking for a favor, it is important to understand that the individual that you are requesting a favor from owes you absolutely nothing. It's much better to presume that nobody owes you anything ever, because like I said before, once you get your life hung up in the actions or opinions of other people, you're basically a slave. And we are creatures bound by nature, which means we are constantly in a state which requires an energy exchange. So no matter how altruistic you are, every time you are asked to do something, part of you calculates the risk and reward of that task, and you try to subconsciously figure out whether that task is going to give you any fruit or not. And this is the difference between a friend who is annoying and asking you for favors all the time, and that friend that asks you for favors, but you go out and adventures with that person. It's a very different way to be. Whenever I ask requests from anybody, I try to sweeten the pot, right? I try to set up a scenario where it's going to be a good time for the both of us, right? And that's the key. It's both of you. If I were to call my friend and ask for a ride somewhere now, what I would say is, hey man, I really hate to ask you this, but I'm kind of in a situation right now and I need a ride to work tomorrow. And I was hoping that you could pick me up, and maybe you could pick me up a little earlier so we could go get some breakfast first. I used to work in a nursing home as an assisted living nurse, and I would work with people who had Alzheimer's and dementia. One of the things that they trained the nurses to do is to understand that when interacting with individuals who have low levels of communication skills, it is important to ask WIIFM, which is what is in it for me. It was important to understand that the residents that I worked for had their own wants, and it was my job to try to understand what these wants were before they even wanted them or requested them, because in many cases they couldn't request at all. I truly believe that in this life, what is given comes back to you. So please be generous and offer people things when you make requests. Try and give an energy exchange and to provide love and power to those around you. This is Nick Newman with the Conscienticon, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and please subscribe for more practical spiritual occult wisdom.